During the Industrial Revolution in America, traveling by train got a spike in popularity due to the quick shipping of goods, passengers, and all sorts of stuff, which also led to a spike of new railways and railroads popping up, including one that we'll be speaking about today, the Erie. Originally chartered in 1832 as the New York and Erie Railroad, it connected Piermont to Dunkirk, New York, a city located on the shore of Lake Erie. Expansions quickly came throughout the 1840s, going to places like northern Pennsylvania, just over the Delaware River. By the 1850s, steamboats connected Dunkirk with Michigan over Lake Erie. In the 1890s, the New York and Erie simply just rebranded themselves as the Erie. Going back to the early to mid 1840s, the Erie just completed its main line through southern New York, and the first train runs through without issue and much fanfare and celebration. However, this section of the Erie's original main line between Harriman and Otisville, New York, was seen as really hilly and curvy, making travel times long. Despite this, it was used by revenue flagship passenger trains such as the Erie Limited and the Atlantic Express, along with daily freight trains. However, this was starting to become an issue. What did Erie do? Well, imagine yourself in the year of 1906 and you're a worker for the Erie. Hey, Frank, you know what I just found? What is it, boss? Our main line in this specific part of New York is kinda hard for trains to get through. It's very twisty and hilly and has a lot of grades. You think we're being too harsh on our engineers? Well, I don't know, boss. I just work here. And not willingly. What was that, boy? Nothing, sir. I was just trying to say that if our main line is so tricky for trains to get through, how is it our most successful? Is it because of the scenery? Right. You know what? I have an idea. Men!
Yeah,
Despite our main line having been completed for well over 50 years now, I believe your lovely co-worker Frank here just came up with a brilliant idea. I really didn't. Let's build a completely new line, but particularly in New York's southern tier. I've made the discovery that perhaps we're being a little too harsh on our trains with the current line in this neck of the valley. It's all twisty and has so many grades. So, effective immediately, we'll be building a new cutoff, splitting off at Newburgh Junction, still going to Port Jervis but via Kimball Hall and Otisville.
Wait, but what about Middletown, sir? That's a really major stop on the main line.
Excellent question, Charlie. The line won't be really used for passenger trains, as it'll be mostly for fast freights to avoid the congestion issues we already have on our main line. So the main line will still regularly see passenger service with little to no change. So without further ado, let's get to work, gentlemen.
Ugh, thanks, Frank.
So, between 1906 and 1909, Erie's new Geimert cutoff was built. Later, it was renamed to the Graham Line to honor the railroad's chief engineer, James Graham. According to Wikipedia, the cutoff was named for the little-known station at its west end, where it joins the original main line on the grade down to Port Jervis. In contrast to the main line, the Grand Line was almost completely flat. The main line had grades of up to 1.3%, which means that some freight trains needed to use helper engines, while the Grand Line was strictly at a 0.6% grade steepest, with the minimum grade of 0.2%. Also, unlike the main line, the Grand Line was completely grade separated, which basically means it had no level crossings. While this was rare for the Erie, it did mean that it was 7 miles longer than the current section of the main line. The Graham Line hosted what are still considered tourist attractions. For example, the famous Moodna Viaduct was built just outside of Salisbury Mills, New York, with the construction of the line, and it was and still is the second highest and longest railroad trestle east of the Mississippi River. Also, nearby the current Otisville station lies the Otisville Tunnel, located at the line's highest point. It's now known as Metro North's longest tunnel, spanning 5,314 feet in length, or just over a mile long. The Erie Railroad built a short-lived commuter and freight branch called the Newburgh Branch, way before they built the Graham Line, but by the time the branch closed to passenger service in the mid to late 1930s, it was considered as part of the Graham Line. Freight trains used the branch into the late 70s. The Graham Line's mostly flat surface allowed for freight trains to reach high speeds. I'm not talking about no crazy 90-mile-per-hour freight trains, but I'm pretty sure 70 miles per hour was considered fast for freight trains, and to be honest, it still is today. The Erie main line still remained in use for luxury passenger service until around the 1960s, when they ditched it for the Lackawanna Railroad's main line to get into Scranton via East Stroudsburg. The last regularly scheduled luxury train to go along the Erie's main was the Atlantic Express in 1965, which by then was operated by Erie Lackawanna, their controversial merger that was formed in 1960. By this time, the line was falling into disrepair, with the Graham Line doing just fine with their fast freight service. The line itself survived into the NJ Transit/Metro North era, with the last ever passenger train to use it being a commuter train hauled by GE U34CH in 1983. After that, Conrail chose to abandon the line almost completely. Actually, let's focus on the year of 1983. That was when the Erie's main was officially closed, but by the 90s, some of it was turned into a rail trail. However, in late 1973, the New York MTA agreed to subsidize the existing Erie-Lackawanna service on the Port Jervis Line between Suffolk and Port Jervis, which became a part of Conrail by 1976. The MTA subsidy began on September 16th of the very next year, with NJ Transit subsidizing the service within New Jersey. The MTA was only responsible for paying for Conrail's operation and maintenance of the line and stations. By 1983, the commuter operations were shifted to run on the Graham Line, making these the first officially scheduled passenger trains to use the line. First starting as a shuttle service to and from the Suffern station, there were initially 8 total trains per day with 4 each way, usually powered by Bud RDC rail cars operated by Metro North, taking over Conrail's previous operations. Since this was the first regularly scheduled passenger service on the Graham Line ever, new stations were built, but without facilities in order to minimize costs. At the time, this was a very controversial move with commuters who were used to having their train stations right in the center of town. However, the MTA said that it was responding to pressure by towns to have the service moved out of the populated areas due to traffic concerns caused by the closures of the grade crossings, according to Wikipedia. On the Graham Line, 4 new stations were built: Harriman, Salisbury Mills, Cornwall, Campbell Hall, and Middletown, Town of Wallkill, with Otisville and Port Jervis following suit after the line rejoins with the Erie Main. Today, the Graham Line is rarely still served with freight trains, with only a couple of freight trains traversing the line every day. The line is still served by Metro North and NJ Transit's jointly operated Port Jervis Line, taking daily commuters from Hoboken to Port Jervis, with 2 trains short running at Middletown on weekdays. Trains normally operate out of Hoboken on a semi-express service pattern, skipping some or most local stations in New Jersey, with all trains making a stop at Suffern and then running local until Port Jervis. As of 2025, 27 total trains run between Hoboken and Middletown, with 24 of those trains, 12 in each direction, going the whole route to Port Jervis. On weekends, service is drastically reduced to just 14 trains a day, with 7 in each direction, and no short-term service. The line in total is 87.5 miles long, making it one of the longest revenue commuter rail lines in the New York area. I actually rode this line up to Middletown Station, and by far the most stunning part was going over the famous Moodna Viaduct. Trains go at a slow 30 miles per hour whilst crossing the bridge due to its height, and because the Salisbury Mills Cornwall station is literally right next to it. It goes over the Moodna Creek and the former Newburgh branch that was mentioned earlier. It's been abandoned since the mid-80s though. Norfolk Southern owns the tracks on this line, which they lease to the Middletown and New Jersey Short Line Railroad, which interchanges with them. The former stations on the Erie Main were abandoned and demolished, except for one. While the Middletown Town of Wallkill station isn't actually located in Middletown, the Erie's old Middletown Depot, located at the center of downtown, was turned into what is now known as the Thrall Library, open since 1995. The Graham Line is a marvel to behold and a genius move to accomplish faster and better operations. The Erie basically ditched their main line for a faster and more straightforward route. It was so successful that passenger trains still use it to this day. The main line may no longer see revenue service, but at least it could still be remembered with the current rail trail. By the way, I highly recommend riding the Port Jervis Line as it is super worth it. Round-trip tickets to and from Hoboken go for around $30, which is a great deal considering it's a 2.5 hour train ride. Well, there's the story of the Erie's Graham Line, a high-speed freight marvel that still runs to this day. Thank you all for watching. You can always like, subscribe, do whatever you want, I do not care. Anyway, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Farewell and have an amazing day.